Brought to you by Dale Carnegie of Orange County, this is the 411 on Leadership podcast, where we discuss common sense leadership practices with executives in Southern California to transform you into the leader people want to follow. Hey everybody, welcome to the 411 on Leadership podcast. I am Steve Thomas. The man to my left is John Campbell. And today we're going to summarize what we've been talking about these last few weeks as it relates to being inclusive leaders and what our contributors are looking for. And so, John, how's everything going? Go ahead and start us off. I need some coffee, man. I really need to make a point to talk to Brian. And Brian's always been so gracious to say, hey, you know what? Do you want some coffee beforehand? And I always reject him. But you know what? Beginning next month, I think I'm going to accept
you should get on some of that coffee. Well, one of the things that we want to highlight, if you're tuned in with us now, we'd encourage you to, whatever platform you're on, if you can like, subscribe, leave a comment. We want to hear from you as we're talking through these things on leadership. And it is important for us so that we can comment back and have a discussion, a dialogue. That's important. And we've appreciated so many of you who provided your comments and have been a part of the conversation with us for the last few weeks. And so please make sure you do that. It helps us if you do that. And if you want to share it, if there's something, the topics come up that you've been involved in or interested in, and you'd like to share that on whatever platform, man, that is extremely helpful for us. So thanks.
And we're also using this to build this community of leaders. And so feel free to drop us some comments as well, and maybe send us direct messages as well. You can reach John directly through LinkedIn, myself as well, and just let us know what are some of the things that are influencing your leadership. What are some of the practices that you're doing that's a huge impact for your organization? One of the joys that we get in doing this is really being able to expose the practices of local executives and what they're doing with their teams and how they're really engaging their teams, especially as we're leaving behind this pandemic and entering into that better normal. So we've been talking about inclusive leadership and what that looks like, and we've just had a great number of guests of executives that have joined us these last 3 weeks, and so we wanted to take the opportunity just to as we listened to a podcast, and it's different, right, John, when we're interviewing guests and so I mean we're listening. However, we always want to, in addition to listening, we're getting ready to move forward, with that next question. And so when we re-listen to the podcast, it's really good to just really listen and pick up some more things that we may have missed as we were doing these podcasts.
Well, just like with anything, when you're learning, when you're exploring something, I like the idea of marinating, right? We were just talking about food before we started the podcast and great meat, right? And if you've got chicken, if you've got beef, whatever it is, you let it marinate, you let it sit, you let it kind of soak in and gain more of those things. So we get a chance to do that as we talk about these principles, because it makes a difference. And sometimes some of our guests have shared some things that we don't always catch in the moment, and then as we listen back, go, oh wow, that was powerful stuff, or here there's added elements to that. And so that's what we want to take some time and really talk through some of those things. And man, Steve, over the last couple of weeks, I mean, one of those was talking about really looking at the element of empowering your team. And Nathan Condainer talked to us from Jobs Mall about empowering the team to move forward into some of those different areas. And it was just so many positive things from that. What did you take away from some of that?
Yeah, so one of my takeaways is with what Nathan mentioned as it relates to empowering his team. And one of the things he said was like, you can't have inclusion without empowerment.
Yeah.
And it's not power over, but it's power with. And so really, the question that I'm pondering and I'm thinking for us as us listeners as well, is like, how much power are we truly giving over to our team? How are we empowering them to do the things that are best for the organization? It kind of flows into the area of trust and the and the ability of we're not going to empower people to do certain tasks if we don't trust them to do those tasks. And that's where we were so grateful for TJ and just the things that he's doing as he's left essentially his business to his general manager as he expands in a different state. So, but I'm curious, John, to hear from you as we talk about being leaders that are trustworthy, that also empowers others as well. What are a couple of things that have stood out for you specifically?
Well, there is definitely a combo, right? And a lot of leadership principles, it's not that you put them in a box and it's you're this at this point, you're this at this point, you're this at this point. They dovetail together, right? We talk about especially empowering and trustworthy. We saw that, Nathan talked about it, and TJ, as you said, exemplified that. He had to leave his organization at the hands of his management and see them really move forward. And so that's kind of the two-way street. So they know they can trust him because he's willing to give them some authority, empowering them to take control of some things. So it's not just about him talking about it or us as leaders talking about it. It's about us as leaders giving authority and responsibility to our team, and huge.
Totally. And it just reminds me, and one of the things that I think about that I'm very grateful for is I'm definitely grateful for the team that I work with here in Orange County, part of Dale Carnegie, and how they're living this out in the sense that, they are trusting me to take care of a specific territory, and in their trust of me to take care of the specific territory and the clients that we work with, they're also empowering me to make certain decisions. Now, obviously, there's a framework that is, that's there, and we make those decisions within that framework. But some of the times I get mad at Steve. Steve is the person who leads our Orange County franchise, and I always kind of go on with Steve, hoping that he would make the decision for me, or I can just kind of lean on him on some of the decisions. But then he would come back and he would kind of flip that around and turn that on me, like, what do you think, or what do you want to do? And essentially we'll go by with what you want to do. And I'm like, oh man, and it's just but then looking at the importance of that and how much confidence that has been built up over time because of that trust and empowerment, I just feel more confident being able to work in a specific way with certain clients to organize or to do certain things with clients and to make those decisions that would best benefit the client, which I know would best benefit our organization as well.
Practical principle that you already talked about this morning, Steve. And if you're a leader listening right now, when you've got team members coming into your office to say, hey, what do you think about this? It's an amazing leadership principle to turn that around and say, hey, what do you think? You've done the research, you've talked about it, and you need to train your team so that they come up with some solutions. Typically you come at, worst case scenario, best case scenario, and then something down the middle, right? What do you think is the best course of action? Get their feedback on that. Allow them. You don't always have to be the expert. Maybe at the end of the day, you're helping to guide that decision, but you allow them to come with some possible ideas, and then you can help walk them through that. Maybe they missed something. Maybe they thought of something that you didn't think of. So empowering principle, right? Ask your team members, hey, what do you think we should do?
Definitely. And then also think about or jot down a list, and I guess I'm grabbing my tip for the day, and I'm bringing it to this portion of it because it just kind of naturally flows this way. Is look at the people on your team and think about, or even write down that person or persons on your team that you can trust them with a little bit more. They've demonstrated ability in maybe certain projects that they're doing. They've been excellent in terms of following through on certain projects. And so who is it on your team that you can identify as someone that you can not only place more trust in, but then also someone that you can empower as well? One of the things I love what TJ's doing is, and one of the things he mentioned was the fact that investing in those people that we trust. So whether those are Dale Carnegie courses or or some other education courses, maybe a college, or whatever it is, those people that you've indicated that you've trusted, what then are we doing as leaders to invest with them? Because I think we both believe in the ideas that if you can be trusted with a little, then you can also be trusted with a lot. So
absolutely amazing, and it is important. And studies have shown over time and time again that when you invest, even sometimes small amounts in your team members, I'm not saying that to say do the minimum amount possible, but small investments of time and training return 10 times, X times, exponentially their output, their level of leadership. People rise up to that, right? We know it's a Dale Carnegie principle, right? Give people a fine reputation to live up to.
Yep.
Build that for them, give them the tools. And a lot of times, you know this, Steve, we've seen it over and over again with people that we've worked with, people that we've managed. There are people who are extremely trustworthy, knowledgeable, loyal employees, but they don't see themselves in that position. And when we as a leader says, hey, I think you can do this, I think it's time for you to step up to this and help them get to that position, get to that place, that is extremely empowering.
I think it also opens the door to what we talked a little bit about last week with Tracy as it relates to being authentic and transparent. You know, as you mentioned, some people don't think that they can get to this particular position, you know, for some reason or another. Maybe they think they don't have the skills, or maybe they think they're maybe just not good enough to be that way. And I think we as leaders could bridge that gap a little bit by being authentic and transparent with our people, with just really putting ourselves in front of them, saying, hey, you know what, this is where I started. I didn't have it all together. This is the mistakes that I've made.
Wait, leaders make mistakes?
Believe it or not, leaders do make mistakes, and it's important to admit those mistakes. I know Dale Carnegie, one of his principles, if you make a mistake, admit it quickly and emphatically. And what that does is not only does it build authenticity, but then it also builds trust as well. One of the things I love with what Tracy had mentioned, and the main takeaway that I came away with as we were looking to be more authentic and transparent, is that you don't have to be perfect in order to be professional. And that's huge, because unfortunately, there have been times that, I've been exposed to, certain leaders that, in certain instances, they'll be like, well, you know what, I did this and I'm going to do it just because that's just the way I am. And so you just got to deal with it. And I mean, understand, we definitely want to be authentic in leadership, but at the same time, we want to also be professional as well. And we need to realize that, yes, in our quest to be, more authentic, we do have to take accountability for some of the decisions that we made. And in doing so, we are going to build that trust within our team. And they're going to look at us and be like, okay, you know what? He was pretty upfront about making this type of mistake. He owned it. He's accountable for it. We're moving forward together. And I think that, there's just the amount of trust that can be built from a situation like that could be huge for a team.
So, and what you're saying, Steve, is being authentic or admitting mistakes is not an excuse to be not accountable.
Yes.
So I can't just say, oh, I just whitewashed it. Oh, that's just the way I am. Or that's just the way I was brought up. Nope. That's not it. That's not it. You got to come to the table with being able to be authentic and transparent and say, and in that process, I'm learning whatever that is. Is it learn to be a different type of manager? Learn to understand. I mean, one of those things that we step on each other's toes all the time are with cultural references, because it's something that maybe I'm not used to it. Maybe somebody comes in with of a different language, and I'm used to, or a language background, and I'm used to reacting and responding in a certain way, not realizing that I'm stepping on their toes. And if somebody says, hey, that's a little insensitive, I can't just say, oh, that's just me, I didn't know.
Right. I mean, and it goes back to the fact that we all have biases.
Yes.
And I think that's something that we all have to admit. Because I mean, we all have biases, whether it's conscious or unconscious. Our responsibility, though, as leaders, is to not only recognize our own biases, which means to really have that internal, honest conversation with ourselves and recognize what those are. And then also not just say, hey, you know what, we know what it is, but now we have to now do our best to mitigate any sort of negative effects that would the impact that would have on the organization and also the teams that we work with. And so that's something that's definitely huge.
And when we're talking about it, or did you want to finish on that one?
No, I'm good. I've just said, you're good.
Well, there's one of the things when we talk about inclusivity and leadership, and I love sports references, right? Because you touched on biases, and we have a tendency to default to things that we like, that I'm comfortable with. But if every team looked like John Campbell or acted like John Campbell, we'd not be as effective. Like, let's take a football team, for example. We like sports. We're sports references, right? Arguably, now we're going to step in some crazy water here. Some people might think Tom Brady is the GOAT. The greatest of all time,
but he is.
It's hard to argue against that. Some people might. I happen to be a huge Joe Montana fan, and I would rather it be Montana. But it's kind of hard when the guy doesn't have enough fingers anymore.
His 7 is the number of perfection, right?
He's running out of fingers. He needs to grow another hand. So here's the thing with that, Steve. If a football team put on the field 11 Tom Brady's, would that team win?
I don't think they would win, believe it or not, even though they've got all the
but he's the greatest of all time, Steve.
At a position.
At a certain position, right? He brings certain skills to the table, which at that position, he's the best. But he would be extremely ineffective as a blocker. You couldn't put him on the offensive line. He would be less effective. He's not the fastest guy. You don't want to put him out there as a wideout. Right, we're going to keep going to these. I'm sorry if you're not a football fan, because we had some references. The point being, think of whatever team it is. You don't always need the exact same person in every. So when we talk about diversity and inclusion, the idea that your team can be more effective, more successful, better ideas, more unique, creative. I mean, the creativity, when you got people with different mindsets. I mean, one of the things I've read about in a book by Malcolm Gladwell, and he talks about the levels of success for those with dyslexia, that some of the greatest companies in our country and some of the leaders in certain industries, he says one of the best trial lawyers in the country is a gentleman with dyslexia. And sometimes hearing him read at a court case is difficult because he struggles. He says, but here's the thing with someone with dyslexia, they see things differently than we do, right? They're able to approach a solution, come up with different ideas, right? And I use that as a small example, but when we're as a team, as you talked about, we're biased. We tend to like what we have, but when we diversify that and we get some of these different elements, we're empowering our teams to make decisions that we're not always the ones coming up with that.
Yep.
Our team can grow.
Yep. And remember these stats, and this was from a Deloitte study. It was part of a Harvard Business Review article. It said teams with inclusive leaders are 17% more likely to report that they are high performing, 20% more likely to say they make high quality decisions, and 29% more likely to report behaving collaboratively. So I encourage you, when you have the opportunity, listen to the last few podcasts that we've done. We want to take the opportunity to thank Nathan of Jobs Mall, TJ of Reed Metal Finishing, Tracy of the Mark USA, all great CEOs that are doing such great things at the executive level to really bring out that collaboration and really foster an environment of inclusivity, because we know that diversity benefits and thrives when there is inclusion.
That's right.
And so I encourage you to listen to those three and just hear about the great things that they're doing as part of their organizations. And the last thing on this is that one of the things I like about those, as well as the other guests that we have on the executive that we have on our podcast, is that they're like super relatable. I mean, they are the people that are literally like, down the street that, we may or may not think that they are executives, but they have just been really relatable and really open and really honest about the things that they're doing. And we're hoping that that's bringing you that's listening to this, that it's really bringing you value. If you have any comments or questions that you'd like to address, go ahead and put that in the comment section of this particular live showing. We'd love to be able to answer those. We'd love to be able to interact with you. And so if you like what you're hearing, if you like that content, go ahead and give us a like. Click that like button, as well as I know that we are on live via YouTube, Facebook, and LinkedIn as well. And so there's a particular study that we wanted to, well, not study, but there's what we call a case study that we kind of wanted to take a look at, and just kind of like look this through the prism of what we've been talking about these last few weeks as it relates to being authentic, transparent, trustworthy, and empowering. And so, John, what is the recent thing that you've been reading that you'd like to kind of bring to the forefront here in the last few minutes that we're together?
Well, one of the things that we like to typically do, and our guests here, we bring them in because they show the positive side of the topics that we're going through as a leader. There is the opposite side of that too, when leadership fails, right? When there is a challenge with leadership, when they don't include these things, when they're not authentic, when they're not empowering or trustworthy. We saw that recently. And some of you may be aware that there is what has been called the reckoning within the craft beer industry. Now, Steve and I are not experts in craft beer industry, but we can see from a leadership perspective. And what has happened is there came to light a number of instances of sexism, abuse, harassment within the industry, which has kind of been seen as an old boys club, right? It's kind of been an industry that's been a guys club situation. We can think there's some industries that are like that, and the beer being one of them. And situations of sexual harassment has come out of that. We're not here to talk about that but as a leader, we've seen, because of this reckoning, we've seen a CEO, at least one of them, has stepped down within the last week from his organization. We've seen individuals who have been fired in leadership, whether management. We've seen, board and other fans of craft beer have reacted to the situation. And Steve, we just want to talk about, so what happens when a leader, when you don't take these kind of things serious in your business environment? This is what happens.
Definitely. And as you mentioned, there's so much on, sexism in the workplace, and we can devote a couple of podcasts for this. And, a part of me feels a little uncomfortable if I can be authentic and transparent with you. It's because, obviously I'm a male. And so I don't feel like I have, I guess, the moral high ground per se. But with that being said, that's no excuse for us not to educate ourselves. And I really took this opportunity just to really look into it. I mean, you know about it, but then it really gave me an opportunity just to go a little bit deeper. And as I look at some of the things that can happen as a result of sexism in the workplace, whether, it's insults via jokes, whether it's the role stereotypes or, the gender labeling, or, even devaluing women's opinion, the effect that first and foremost it has on women, and just the horrible effects, whether it be like, with any of their mental health, or it hurts their advancement within the organization. An extreme version of that is that could lead to some sort of assault, whether it's whether it's verbal or, heaven forbid, physical. And so, but then also we take a more of a macro level in terms of the result to the organization and the branding of the organization. That is something that could really hurt that organization. And we've seen the effects where I believe, one of the CEOs, and I forget his name off the top of my head, I mean, he ended up resigning. And just seeing the ripple effects of that within the industry. And you talk about destroying trust, not only internally, but also externally with the clients that you deal with. That's going to really have an effect on the organization. So, and I'll throw this back at you. So again, when we mention trust, authenticity, empowerment, transparency, which, kudos to those individuals that have come out with statements and that have said, hey, you know what, this is an issue that we want to address. But as we look at the things, these aren't just, it's not just fluff topics, or it's not topics that, we can just kind of gloss under the rug, and that we can be like, hey, you know what, this is just the way it is. No, it shouldn't be the way it is. And this is where we can take a stand and speak out against those things, and really put us on that path of healing and building that trust and also that authenticity.
Yeah,
and
some of
empowerment.
those things that you as a leader need to do in this situation. For one, is there needs to be open and honest communication.
Hmm.
And when topics of these things come through, I mean, and the other is you mentioned toxic work environment. The
Hmm.
stress that your team is under, we all know that if you're stressed, you don't work at peak optimization.
Hmm.
So if you created a stressful environment, I mean, so you need to have those, maybe it's 360 assessments, right? How am I as a leader? Do I have blind spots? Because that
Hmm.
happens, as we've talked about it. And maybe stuff that you think is, oh, it's no big deal. Sometimes it's a big deal, or it's a big deal to that person. Is your HR department empowered to respond to these situations? I mean, is it just your HR department? Some of them mentioned that it was like labeled a trash can, put your HR complaints here.
Hmm.
Okay, haha, it's a funny joke. But when it's serious stuff, as you mentioned, some of the things, and that's how you treat it, that's a failure of leadership.
Yeah, for sure. And it's funny for organizations. You mentioned assessments and just really taking a deep dive and really looking at the culture.
Yeah,
Organizations, they're afraid to do that. Like
yeah,
I remember working with an organization where on the surface everything was great and they liked the way things were, and they had brought us in to do an assessment before we actually did some coaching with their team.
right.
And during that assessment, it revealed certain things that they were like, hey, you know what? I don't know if we should have done this because, we had this great lovey-dovey environment. And now you're bringing in an assessment and look, it's pointing out to this. I don't know if that's good. And understand, assessments are not anything that should be punitive, although in some
Right.
instances it does reveal things that need to be handled. However, if we're looking as leaders to take that next step within our organization and
Yeah.
to really impact the people that work with us, and that yes, we lead them, but they also work with us,
Right.
then it's going to take some authenticity.
It does.
It's going to take some transparency. It's
And
going to take
courage.
some. It takes a lot of courage.
Takes a
Yeah,
lot of
it's going to
courage as
take
a
a
leader.
lot of courage to do that. And
Right.
so, if we talk about wanting to take that next step, um, look at your organization, and you probably have something different, and I don't want to go because this may mean different things to different people,
Right.
but look at your organization first and look at yourself, and what is that area either within yourself first and then within the organization
Yeah.
that you need to take that next step forward and exhibit some courage with, whether it's analyzing what your organization looks like via assessment, whether it's evaluating yourself and identifying, okay, what are those, unknown or known biases that I have that could
Right.
stand in the way of, of that would negatively impact the people that I work with or the people that are on my team. What is that things that we can identify that we could not only identify and have the courage to identify, but actually take that next step and do something about it.
It's the mirror. It
Mm.
allows us to reflect and see. And if we think about it, if we've got a mark on our face, we don't always want to know that I'm walking around with a mark on my face, smudge of some sort. But when I look in the mirror and I see that, do I get mad at the mirror? No, I
No,
take care of it, right? Because I
I get
realize
mad at
what's
my mirror, but yeah, but yeah, I just can't do anything about it.
right. But it gives us a
No,
chance to
no,
identify if there's a problem.
yeah.
And if so, how do we fix it, right? I didn't know
Mm,
without the mirror that I got a mark on my face. It's the
mm,
same thing with an organization. We may think we're at a certain place and we realize, hey, we're not there. I mean, as we looked at the industry, I mean, this is a major impact on multiple good size organizations
mm,
have felt the impact of this. They may have lost some customers for life.
mm,
We don't just think about that, but they've impacted people's lives. Let's say that. Let me take it to that level, right? There's
mm,
some real people's lives who've been impacted potentially harmfully forever.
mm,
And we hope that they are able to get the care and support that they need. And then you as a leader need to be able to do that because it could impact you too, right? I mean,
mm,
somebody lost their jobs because they failed to act.
mm.
Please do that as a leader. Please stop, take a moment, reach out. We've got tools that can be helpful for you as a leader because this is real stuff, real lives, and it impacts people on a daily basis.
We help people with their organizations impact their culture, and as we're leaving behind COVID and
Yes.
entering into this better normal, we as an organization are prepared to come alongside your organization and effectively impact your culture and also reinvigorate your culture moving forward, utilizing our tools and utilizing our solutions, whether it be our focusing on leadership, whether it be focusing on your sales and whatever, focusing on communications as we're coming back into the office.
Yeah.
There's that awkwardness of talking with people in person again.
The interpersonal communication
Exactly.
skills, yeah.
Some of the things we take for granted, we come
Right.
into a more social setting and it feels weird, it feels awkward. Well, you know what? This is an area that our organization,
Right.
we have been doing this for over 100 years, and this is our specialty. And so if you're looking into reinvigorating your culture and impacting your organization, I encourage you to give us a call, ocdalecarnegie.com. You can reach us at 949-833-3253. And
links in the show notes.
the links are in the show notes. We are definitely here to help you as we are entering. I love to say the better normal. I don't like new normal. I like the better normal
Next step,
because
new
it
chapter.
is a new chapter, but it is going to be better. I believe it'll be better for all of us, and we as leaders could be leading the charge and making that impact, a positive impact on our organization and on the people that we lead. Final thoughts. So it looks like time has already gone by, and we're going to wrap up. But any final thoughts, John, as we look and as we thank those that have joined us in the podcast earlier?
Yeah, as always, we want to give a big shout out to Brian from Sitch Radio for making this happen. Thank you to all of our guests, as Steve's mentioned. Thank you to you, those that are listening, for your comments, your feedback. Please, we talked about some really good stuff, some really practical tools that you as a leader can do. What can you do? We didn't talk about everything. Is there something that you've used that our community can benefit from? There's something that you're doing in these areas: trustworthiness, empowerment, being authentic and transparent.
Yep. So we will not be filming. We'll not be filming next week for Memorial Day. So for those that have served in our armed forces, we do want to take that opportunity, or take that Monday, to recognize those that have fallen in service for this country. And we do want to say thank you to all those veterans that have served us and that have provided that foundation platform for us to have podcasts like this and us to have conversations.
We can have an open
like
dialogue.
This. Yep. And so special recognition to our producer, Brian, that was also in the military as well. So thank you, sir, for your service. Thank you to everyone who's joining us on our podcast today. We look forward to seeing you not next week, but the week after that. In the meantime, remember, managers light a fire under people, leaders light a fire in people. Bye for now.